Welcome to Pushing Forward with Alycia, a podcast that gives disability a voice. Each week, we will explore topics like confidence, ambition, resilience, and finding success against all odds. We are creating a collective community that believes that all things are possible for all people. Open hearts, clear paths, let's go. Welcome back to Pushing Forward with Alycia. I'm Alycia, and I am thrilled about my next guest. I've got a friend, a colleague, a fellow disability advocate, entrepreneur, coach. She's a force to be reckoned with. I have watched her platform grow massively over the last couple years. Alycia has a platform called The Seated Perspective, and she's dedicating her life to changing the narrative around disability by centering it to disabled joy, which we're going to dive into. I love that. The word joy in itself is such a beautiful word connected with disability. I can't wait to discuss this. Congratulations on this beautiful platform that you have developed and is blossoming into so many spaces. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, to your point, we have been following each other since you spoke for Boundless Babes a while ago. And yeah, it's cool to have markers along the journey, seeing how far it's come. So thank you for pointing that out, how much has grown lately.
I love that the Rolettes experience in the Boundless Babes, which is a women empowerment group that we talk about a lot on this, because I've met so many amazing women that have been on this show. I'm so grateful for the connections that I've made, specifically for the ones like you that feel very much like a sisterhood, lifting each other up and being there for each other. So I'm so happy that we met. And your disability journey, I feel like you've come so far. It's been really beautiful to watch from an outsider looking, and I'm really proud of you. I think that's honestly where we should start. Can we look back a little bit and talk about your disability journey, whatever you're comfortable with, where it started?
I was injured. I sustained a spinal cord injury when I was 14. I was in Argentina with my family on a ski trip. Argentina is where I grew up and where my family is now. I know it comes out of left field a lot of the time because it's not something I talk about super often on my account, I think. But yeah, it's where my family's from. And yeah, it was just a very quick and, as spinal cord injuries are, quick and immediate thing that changed my life within a matter of seconds. And what was interesting about my experience is that I was ready to go to boarding school in Canada at the point. I was 2 weeks away from going. Obviously, that didn't happen then. It was almost like how COVID was at the beginning, where it's oh, it'll be over in 2 weeks. So I was oh, I'll be better in 2 weeks and I'll be able to make it. Once we got more information about what the injury was and what it meant, plans changed, but it very much gave us a goal for, okay, it's not going to happen this year, but it is going to happen next year. My rehabilitation process was very focused on, okay, how do we get to that goal? How do we make it so that you're independent enough in a year, which now, if I think back on it, is just ridiculous. To me, I have a lot more compassion for that person than I maybe had at the time. This is the survival mechanism that we're leading on, is pushing forward towards that goal. And we made it happen. A year later, went to boarding school across the continent in a school that had zero disability representation. I was the first wheelchair using student on campus. So that meant there was a lot of adaptations that had to be made and just thinking that had to evolve. And of course, it didn't all happen in my time there. I've done a lot of reflection since on what my time was like there and what could have been a lot better, including some of the adults at the school that really didn't have the capacity or capability. And yeah, I think that experience ultimately is what taught me at a very young age to pull focus away from my disability. The instinct that any teenager has at that time is don't focus on what makes you different, but rather normalize and acclimate as much as you can. And I just made myself different in other ways. I did really well at school. I participated in musicals and plays, and I just excelled in other ways because I didn't want that to be the focus. And that's an instinct that like became very ingrained in me. And it's how I went into adulthood. It's how I navigated university. It's how I navigated my first few years of work. And it wasn't until I started taking myself out of these systems and I started freelancing and giving me the space to really figure out what my identity was outside of someone who excels and does really well, that I started to give space to my disabled identity more. And that's the space from which seated perspectives emerged. It was me realizing that I had put up with a lot of different things. I had come up against microaggressions and situations at work where I just went with the flow instead of asking for better. And I guess from a place also of just realizing that I deserved better too.
That second piece is really important because what you're talking about, I think a lot of us do, just get through it and want to be accepted and mask as much as we can until you get to the point where you go, you know what? I deserve better. This is too hard. Why am I making this so hard? And I think that sometimes comes with age and experience and getting burnt out of putting too much effort.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got to the final straw that I didn't even realize was the final straw in a work environment where I had to advocate for myself and like ask for just what felt like common sense in terms of accessible events and things like that. It just sort of, it took that to make me realize all the things I had been through. And yeah, I don't know what switch flipped inside me that I was like, wait a minute, I'm missing something here. In going out and started seated perspectives, I didn't just start educating and putting my message out there. I also gave myself the gift of community, which all the stuff I talked about before had just passively kept me away from. And the magnificent transformation that comes from seeing your stories reflected back at you, I can't put words to it still. For me, the first thing was coming across Rebecca Tausig and reading her book, Sitting Pretty. I can still feel the physical reaction I had to reading her book and how it was like, oh, I'm not alone here. I don't know how it is that we convince ourselves that as disabled folks, we're the only ones experiencing the things we're experiencing. Finding that community was so important to me. It's what gave me the space to just start being much more comfortable in myself and realizing that I deserve community and I deserve ease and I deserve joy. And yes, that sometimes comes at the cost of some other uncomfortable moments when we have to advocate and we have to push to put ourselves in spaces that aren't designed for us. But it's reframed how I make decisions. It's reframed what I choose to do and what I choose not to do, which before was like, again, go with the flow. And now I'm like, nah, no, I'm not going to do this thing that makes me uncomfortable. And I'm not going to compromise my comfort for your comfort. Like, just not.
I remember one of the first times I did that for myself, it was at a family event and there were a bunch of steps and I was all of a sudden strong enough to be tired of it and just say, I'm not going to go there. And somebody in the family was like, Alycia, that's not like you. And I go, yeah, but it is me. That is so powerful and liberating for us to just take a break from that. Okay, so you mentioned joy. You mentioned the word joy. Talk about this central concept to your work and what it means to you and how it's inspired you to create this space and this platform and the activism that you're doing. And your voice is strong. It's powerful. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Disabled joys came in early in my journey on seated perspectives. And it was like the first sort of choice I made to center it was doing this series called Moments of Disabled Joy. And I was just like, hey, I now have access to all these really cool stories of people doing cool things in disability. Doing cool things and doing joyful things as disabled folks. And I'm just like, why don't we talk about this more? Like, why is this not a normalized experience? And so that was the first thing. I'm just like, I'm going to feature disabled folks having a joyful time. And the response I got to the first few was like, oh, like people are interested in seeing this, not just disabled folks. Disabled folks are obviously like really keen to have that showcased. And non-disabled folks are like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, I didn't know that this was a thing. I'm like, great. And then it was almost like reverse engineered because I started thinking about, okay, why is this such an appealing avenue for me to follow? And I realized that it's because like disabled joy isn't talked about enough. And there are such like, our society is so stuck in these narratives around disability and that it's either a super tragic thing, it's something that we have to overcome, or it's inspirational, which is a tired trope. Like it's unbelievably tired trope, but it's still there. And I want to change the narrative. I want disability to be normalized. And if we want disability to be normalized, we need to show all the different facets of it. And show that it's as dimensional as any other human experience. And every other human experience has joy. So like that, it's to me like a missing piece in the puzzle that just needs to be put in, and often and always. I think the important thing.
Go ahead.
I think the important thing to say is disability is never always joyful. It's, as Rebecca Taussig says, it's like the both and of disability. There are multitudes in our experience. It goes back to being a dynamic thing. We hold hard and tough and difficult times, but we also have a ton of joy.
And I think also from an internalized ableism perspective, it gives us permission to be happy just the way we are and leverage the power of our path and be joyful in the accomplishment that peace brings to. And obviously, like you said, it's a give and a take and it's an ebb and flow and it's not always joyful. But I think from that perspective of looking at disability as like something that needs to be fixed and that it's bad, as disabled people, we almost have needed the permission to be joyful in our own space and find the bright light in it, which there is. Lifting up the community is core, And I know that you work with a lot of clients on their platforms and creators. Can you share a moment that you really felt like you could see the impact? Is there a story you can share?
Yeah, there are a couple. So I recently worked with Lucy Webster. Like, I can't say enough good things about Lucy. She wrote the book, The View from Down Here, and she has a weekly newsletter with the same title, and is amazing, giving really incisive viewpoints on disability and living at the intersection of womanhood and disability, which is unique in itself. And she got in touch because she was like, I feel stuck on where my brand is at right now. And yeah, just could use your help. And as part of my coaching program, we do 3 1-hour calls on the first one. And I was like, already, I was fangirling. Like, I was coming in as the authority, but still like very much fangirling. But we had a really cool talk because she was like, yeah, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. My colors don't really feel me. And had recently come out as queer and had introduced a lot more color and changed her style. And I was like, I think there's like a mismatch, like how you're showing up on Instagram in terms of compared to the changes you've been making in how you show up in person. And that led us down a journey of changing up her color scheme and her logo, and her friend created a new illustration for her. And then after our coaching program, she launched the brand. I was in tears and seeing the response because it all felt so aligned. That's the power of branding, and what I feel like I'm so focused on in how I produce the content for Seated Perspectives is that once it aligns and it feels authentic, people respond much more. I also worked with Jill Cabernell here in Vancouver. She's starting her journey as a disabled creator and is primarily focused on like disrupting the body positivity space. And I think her main concern is like she didn't feel confident enough showing up. And there was a moment where she said something along the lines of, oh, I'm not an authority in this. And I'm like, no, let's stop a second. Like, your lived experience is what makes you an authority.
Yeah.
And that clicked, something clicked there. And a few weeks later, she started like going on camera and speaking for her account for the first time ever. And that was like such a big moment. And then she started like making stronger claims in the way that she was positioning her content and like taking up space as like someone who's disrupting the space. And it was, that if I just get to sit back and be a cheerleader to the people I work with, I would be happy because it's such a proud moment for me. And I'm just, I don't know. That's the impact I feel that keeps happening. And I'm just excited to keep working with folks who make, like, it's a ripple effect. They keep making an impact as well.
My note here is to ask you, in that work, what are some of the biggest barriers that you're seeing? And what I just heard, a couple were, I don't know if it's insecurity or imposter syndrome or not feeling like you're good enough. What are, like, from a content creator perspective, what are the barriers that you're seeing of, like, entry, whether it's like a personal thing or it's in the market or both?
Yeah, I think the space is there. I think where people get tripped up is that thinking, oh, I'm not an authority, or I guess imposter syndrome to some extent. Or I hear also, oh, I'm not creative. And I'm like, oh, come on. Disabled folks are some of the most creative people I know. Maybe you're not a designer. Maybe you don't know what colors go well together, but we can work on that together. But yes, you are creative. Like, disabled folks are inherently innovative and adaptive, and that makes us, like, really well suited to be entrepreneurs and creators. And that's, like, a myth I like to dispel very quickly. Another one, obviously, and this is something that I'm constantly thinking about, is just general access to income. The reality for a lot of disabled folks is that access to income is hindered because of the way society works and capitalism. And so it was interesting. I was talking at I attended a marketing conference this weekend, and I kept landing on the fact that entrepreneurship and content creation are some of the most accessible forms of income generation for disabled folks because they can do it on their own time. But it's like that hurdle of getting there is actually what's scary to a lot of people. And people don't want to let go of their access to income, or they're worried about the energy that it would take to build something. And so I keep thinking about, the ways that I can support folks in getting there faster so that there is not as big of a barrier. And also there was someone who was talking at the conference who I was really pleased because she centered her knowledge or her expertise around the fact that she has 3 chronic illnesses. And so she's set up a whole bunch of AI and automation systems that mean that her business can run even when she's not feeling well or when she has a flare. So that's got me thinking in the background of, okay, maybe it's a partnership with her down the line, or maybe it's like pairing the brand support with additional systems based thinking that really gets people to a place where they don't have to rely so much on their energy store, or let me flip that, where they can protect their energy store while still generating income for themselves.
I'm loving this, like, modern conversation of AI being an accessibility tool to, like, help us, throughout the day. And this is not the first time. I had another guy on the show, Jan Vishnupolsky, and he was ADHD and neurodiverse, and he uses AI in the workforce. He leads teams, and he'll use it. He builds AI, but he also uses it to put his concepts in to see if the layman mind will understand how they will understand. And I just think it's so fascinating and incredible that these tools are actually accessibility opportunities for us as disabled people to take the load or to help see things through a different lens or whatever. So that's cool. I like that.
It is really cool. And it's interesting what I found interesting at the conference is that the fear around AI is actually bringing up quite a few ableist tropes, I find, as well. People were like, oh, I don't want my kid to be lazy and use the AI to write their essays. And I'm like, okay, let's not generalize here. For some people, using AI, whether it's to write or whether it's to draft something or create a system or automate a function, it's actually lessening the load for them, whether it's cognitive, whether it's mental, whether it's physical. Like, we need to be able to have this conversation as a more holistic thing versus just, oh, I don't want my kid to write their university entrance without sitting and doing the work. And I'm like, oh, okay. But we need to be having, I don't know, a more in-depth conversation there.
Yeah, and broader, like looking through it through a broader lens for sure.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned Argentina, and I find this fascinating about you. I did not know this piece. So you're originally from Argentina. You now live in Vancouver. So two very different cultural experiences, I'm assuming, have shaped your advocacy. And I was wondering, have you noticed how, I don't know, they cross, like how has two different cultures shaped the way that you advocate? And is there an intersection of the two? Because I can imagine they have to be a little bit different.
I would say a lot of my advocacy is shaped primarily by my experience here in Canada. The reality is that sort of in me exiting Argentina, going to boarding school right after my accident has put me on the track to, I'll visit Argentina and I'll go see my family, but it's not a lived experience for me. I'd say the way it does inform me sometimes, and I think I still need to do this more, is it makes me think of the experience of disability outside of just North America and Europe, which obviously is a far more privileged experience than it is in a lot of other parts of the world. So I'm very fortunate that I can choose to live outside of Argentina, which isn't a super accessible place in the world. Even in Buenos Aires, which is the city capital, there's still a lot. There's still a long way to go before I would feel comfortable living there. And it's just a reality of a lot of old buildings and not a lot of progressive thought in that capacity. And I think it's just unfortunately something that's lacking. But the reality also is that there are a lot of disabled. That doesn't mean there aren't disabled folks there. There are a lot of them there, and their access to a lot of things is hindered by the fact that their world is not accessible to them.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a step for me down the line, is to start expanding my advocacy to not just focus on the challenges that we experience day to day in a North American, European culture, but rather go a step further and be like, hey, we need to think about this, or partnering with folks who are there and elevating their voices.
Yeah.
So that they get more exposure.
I agree with that. And I think it's really needed. I love it.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to disabled entrepreneurs or creators who are just starting out on their journey? What is the thing that you would say to them to keep them motivated or to get going, or a tip to build their brand? Is there any advice that you can give?
A couple of things. One, if I were thinking back to where I was when I started, is think big. Because I was very much, if I only influence the people in my circle, then I'll be happy. And I remember my coach at the time, my social media coach, being like, no, we're going to think about how we can monetize things for you. And I'm like, I don't need to think about the money. This is more of a side project. No. I think if I'd gone in with the intention from the get-go, like maybe I'd be a little further down the line than I am now, which is fine. Like I don't regret where I am now in any way, shape, or form. Sorry, I'm dealing with the attention-seeking dog over here. But so I would just say think big, dream big from the get-go, and you'll go realizing what you need to do and adapt and evolve as you go. But don't be afraid to have big aspirations from the get-go. And in terms of thinking about branding, one thing that's true for me in Seated Perspectives is that I thought about it as a brand from the very beginning. Maybe as a procrastination element, maybe not. I immediately started playing with colors and fonts because I wanted to have just a clear and resonant and consistent approach to how I showed up. And that brand has shifted and evolved since then. But I'd say start with that and just start playing a little bit and figuring out what your identity is, and also what the purpose is behind what you want to do. Having a why behind the brand, or however it is you want to show up, is crucial because that lets you have somewhere to go back to whenever you're posting something or entertaining a new opportunity. Then you can go back and be like, okay, does this align with my why? Does it fit my purpose? And that will also give you permission to say no when things don't fit, which is such a powerful thing. Like we should normalize saying no because it's so easy to just say yes to everything.
I'm so bad at it. Oh my God.
So yeah, I really encourage people to think about their why and their vision or their purpose from the very beginning.
And their identity. I like how you frame that. That's a lesson for me to take away from this as well, honestly. Okay, so looking forward, what is the future? What is a North Star and how do we work with you?
Yeah, my North Star at the moment is to keep finding ways to work with disabled folks and building their brands. I've had the honor of working with 7 coachees so far, and it's been such a joy each time. I come off each call just buzzing because it feels like it's exactly what I'm meant to be doing. And then my future eventual North Star that I keep coming back to is something that I really want to do eventually is writing a book on disabled joy and just crisscrossing around the world and talking to different folks about what disabled joy means to them and having that live in physical form in a book. So that's
you need to start that like now.
Yeah, sooner than I think.
Yeah, I think you need to start that now. And
yeah,
when you were talking about the seated perspective, I'm like, that's you. Like, you should be writing that book. I would start that now if I were you.
Yeah, I need to figure out the process, but I will. I have a couple of people who have written a book, so ask them for advice first and go from there.
How we end the show, we need a pushing forward moment from you, a little bit of mantra, something to gift away to our community to be motivated to go and start their branding and their platform.
Yeah, I don't know, just go for it. I think it's so easy to believe that everything's already been done, but it's not true. You have your unique perspective, your unique vision, your unique project that is made unique because it's you behind it. And I think living in that and being authentic about it, because I think authenticity is more valuable than anything else right now, especially on social media, is really going to attract people to you and to your vision and to your mission. And yeah, I think that's all I can really say.
Go for it. I love it. I think that's great advice. I wish I would have done that a long time ago myself. So, Allie, we're going to leave all of your information so everybody can follow you, work with you, book you, hire you to speak, throw a book deal at you, all of those.
Love that.
Thank you for, number one, being in my life. I'm so happy that we have this shared space together, honestly. And just thanks for doing this. You're a really amazing woman. So congratulations.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
And thank you to our Pushing Forward community for joining us again this week. We do have an announcement. For November and December, Pushing Forward with Alycia is going to 2 episodes a month so I can take a little hiatus for the holidays. So that's the announcement on Allie's episode. And we will see you next time. This has been Pushing Forward with Alycia, and that is how Allie and I roll on this podcast.